Marty asked me to kind of be the facilitator this morning. He was in and out of the hospital with some tests yesterday and just kind of overextended, and that took care of most of his energy. So he wasn't sure that he would get here today. He asked me to step in, so that's what we will do. We'll have our discussions. We'll follow the typical pattern, but I don't want to go too far on ahead because I know that he prepares that far in advance and probably has some other ideas that he wants to answer. But if I can provide a little bit of insight and some background into some of the verses where we are, that will be my privilege. David, did you have a reading or a poem or something for us?
Yes, I do, and thank you, Rabbi. I wanted to tell you firstly that last Monday I was diagnosed with COVID, and so I am self-isolating for a few days.
Oh, it's COVID.
COVID. It is a very mild case.
Good.
And I'm already feeling a lot better.
Good.
For my poem today,
wish you refuah, complete healing.
Thank you. For my poetry today, I've told you before how my father really wanted me to inherit his love of Shakespeare, and I think he would have been very pleased that I took it as far as I did. But when he knew that I was inheriting it, he also suggested that I go to some of Shakespeare's colleagues, like Beaumont and Fletcher. And Beaumont's poem from The Woman Hater, 1605, is my quote for today. Is it so much, and yet the morn not up? See yonder where the shamefaced maiden comes into our sight. How gently does she slide, hiding her chaste cheeks like a modest bride with a red veil of blushes. I believe that this refers to the rising of the constellation of Virgo, the shamefaced maiden, in December of 1605. And thank you very much, Rabbi, and back to you.
Thank you, David. Did I read somewhere that there's a meteor shower tonight or something that we should be aware of?
Yes, it is the meteor shower called the Eta Aquarids, and it'll be very late, just before dawn. But it is I'll probably have to miss it because I need the rest. But it is these meteors come from Halley's Comet, and they come twice a year. In May as the Eta Aquarids, and in October, 6 months later, as the Orionids. So we get two chances to look at speckles of dust from Halley's Comet every year.
Okay, thank you. And I did want to point out for all those who are making at least informal notations on a mental calendar, not on an actual calendar, that during this week, the Jewish community worldwide observes Yom HaShoah, observes Holocaust Memorial Day, and then a week later is Israel's Memorial Day that leads into Yom HaAtzmaut, into Israel Independence Day. So there are those who say that for our generation, or at least the contemporary Jewish world, this period of approximately 10 days is as important in our calendar as the Rosh Hashanah to Yom Kippur 10-day period. Okay, that the impact of the Holocaust leading into then recognition of the establishment of Israel, the independence of Israel, the fights for the survival of Israel are just as important to our generation as the stories of creation and the need for the Day of Atonement. So just a thought to throw out that thematically that shows up in some writing of contemporary not in any one denomination, not Reform, Conservative, or Orthodox, but across the streams as the rabbis analyze the impact of what these next 2 weeks mean for all of us. Okay, I believe that we are Leviticus chapter 25, verse 13. Does that look about right? We were finishing up the laws of the Jubilee
Yeah, we didn't.
of the Yovel,
Seven.
but we didn't talk
Maybe I
all
wrote down verse 10 that we were going to go back a little ways. I thought I could be wrong, but I thought.
No, you're right. I threw that out before we all said goodbye last week.
Right, right.
The importance and the implication of the words that are on the Liberty Bell. Proclaim ye liberty throughout the land unto all the inhabitants thereof. Right. But now we see it in context. It's not a single statement that stands out alone. It's in the context that in the 50th year, when the shofar is sounded, that we've talked, this is what we've been talking about, that all people, all debts are canceled, whether they're financial debts, whether they're the slave indentured himself or herself to another family, that is now canceled, and everyone returns back to their own land. We'll come to further implications of that in a few minutes, but that's the context of it, that it's not just coming out of nowhere saying, okay, at a certain time we're going to proclaim liberty throughout the land, or for freedom. The Hebrew word is dror. Miri, do you want to say anything about dror as opposed to wolfish or anything?
Dror is, it would be the opposite of Evet, of Avdut, is Atzmaut, or liberation, something like that. It's the opposite of being enslaved. It's freedom.
Exactly. I think there are some midrashim that pick up on the Hebrew word dror, because on the one hand, ladur means to dwell in a certain, so it's adding a sense of security in your dwelling, in your existence, things like that. Amy, you put a hand up that I saw.
When you mentioned that it is a time that debts are forgiven and everyone returns to their own property, how does this impact the Palestinians?
Aha, like I said, we will be getting to it in a few minutes. Okay.
Okay.
But you're anticipating correctly, because it's a question that goes all the way back in the history of this land. Yep. Okay. So all that, and any other comments or questions about it? All right, so if we continue on, if someone would like to read, we'll begin like 13 through 17.
Okay, I'd be happy to.
Please, thank you, David.
Okay, for it is a jubilee.
25, 13 through 17.
Okay, for it is a jubilee. It shall be holy unto you. You shall eat the increase thereof out of the field. In this year of jubilee you shall return every man unto his possession. And if thou shalt ought unto thy neighbor, or buy of thy neighbor's hand, ye shall not wrong one another. According to the number of years after the jubilee, thou shalt buy of thy neighbor, and according unto the number of years of the crops, he shall sell unto thee. According to the multitude of the years, thou shalt increase the price thereof, and according to the fewness of the years, thou shalt diminish the price of it. For the number of crops doth he sell unto thee. And ye shall not wrong one another. I like that part. But thou shalt fear thy God, for I am the Lord your God.
Okay. Admittedly, economics is not my strong suit. Okay, admittedly. But what it seems to be, and again, I'll defer to somebody else who knows the terminology. It seems to be that in all economic transactions, when we reach the Jubilee, it's like somebody pushes the restart button.
Right.
Okay, so in anticipating that as the Jubilee comes closer, they recognize that it's obviously going to have an impact on what your selling price is. If I'm selling you my home, but I know that in 2 years, that home is going to go back, or the property is going to go back, to either to me or to whoever I purchased it from. If it's within the 50 years, we know that that's going to affect the price one way or the other. Similarly, if after the restart button in year 1, year 2, year 3, it now is going to have a longer tenure for the transaction and for the obligation, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Now, the interesting thing to me, again, I'm not economically oriented, so I don't necessarily understand all of that impact. But what seems to me is that because at the end of the paragraph, and we've seen the phrase before, God, what the Torah is saying is that God is in every transaction. In one way or another, the belief in God, or the fear of God, the reverence of God is part of any agreement, any transaction, any purchase, any loan, and therefore do not wrong one another. David likes the phrase, do not wrong one another. The Hebrew is lo tonu, whether it's and I wrote down whether it's in contracts, and the rabbis interpret further whether it's in contracts or agreements, whether it's in the harsh words that you might say about, so you tell your neighbor, oh, that person really tried to, take advantage of me, exploit me, or whatever, or vice versa. That person was very fair and just in the transaction. They go one step further in lo tonu, do not wrong your neighbor, means that you don't continue to bring up any either misunderstanding or intentional misdeed that the other person, your neighbor, may have done. And the one that they even go further, and when we point this out in classes and whatever, but it's very important, and you see it in Israel, you see people reminding each other of it's basically don't window shop. In other words, it's don't go into a store and talk with the owner or with a salesperson, whatever, if you have no intention of buying whatsoever. If it's a serious negotiation or an exploration of the purchase, that's fine. But don't take up their time necessarily, or get them really invested in working with you to make a deal if you really have no intention of purchasing. And you see it in Israel and in some of the Orthodox neighborhoods. You see people reminding each other of that all the time. Okay, I'm sitting back. Who wants to come in with the comment on that through that paragraph? Again, I don't claim the understanding of all the economics.
But what? Oh, Gail, go ahead.
Oh,
She said-
oh, okay.
Okay, go ahead. Gil.
Okay, sorry. It seems to me as if rather than be concerned about 50 years and all the machinations that go with that, the bottom line is it's more of a, to me, it seems it's more of a reminder to be honest in your transactions. Always,
Mhm.
not just with a 50-year thing in mind, but the real thing, because at the very end, in verse 17, and you shall not persecute each of you his brother, but you shall fear your God. That's the closing of that whole transaction.
Right, well, that's why I said that's the context.
Yeah, that's the real, that's
That
the
to
most
the
important.
biblical author, God is in every interaction,
Right, right.
even if it's a very pedestrian, ordinary business transaction.
So to me, the emphasis really is on that and not the 50-year Jubilee thing.
Mm.
So it's more important to be aware of, your honesty rather than all these rules and regulations and whatever. So
Okay.
that's just how I.
Rabbi Miri.
Well, Gail, I think that you are on the spot, on target, because later on in the Talmud and Pirkei Avot, the issue of not cheating in merchandise and so is so prominent that I have it in my mind very, very strongly. Like, for example, if you sell wine, you cannot take the bottom of whatever is left from the wine and dilute it. Things like that, that they are very precise and not to cheat in a scale. And it's almost like, it has the same importance as don't beat your wife or behave yourself in other areas that we'll call ethical and moral. But this is including to be honest in whatever you do, even in the issue of exchanging merchandise. That's, as you said, the issue is about honesty across the board.
How much,
Go ahead.
how much of the Talmud is concerned, is there a whole tractate on just being honest in business relationship? I'm not that familiar with the Talmud, so. There is a great amount of it concerned with this particular issue.
Yes, yes, and yes.
Okay,
And
thank you.
and more than just one particular.
More than one
tractate.
tractate.
Right, because sometimes the conversation will shift over from, maybe it's a discussion about the Jubilee, maybe it's a discussion about property, maybe it's a discussion about masal matan, about commerce. Okay.
Negotiation.
Right.
Negotiation.
But yes, I think one of the overriding fundamental positions is, yes, let's look to see, is there an ethical, just manner for these to be conducted? That's what God wants us to do. Right?
Speaking of which, Mary, did you ever find that Talmud used in class?
No, and I was looking for all my Haggadot, and I didn't see it among them. I think I need to move to another house, and then I'll find it.
What are we looking for?
A book.
Oh,
We studied the Talmud in a Torah study class for several months, right, Mary? And it
Oh,
was,
and you
and it
got-
was-
Something like that. Yeah.
it was a great book. Well, we did a lesson on it.
okay.
But it was a great book because it just had a couple of little premises at the beginning, and then we spent the rest of the day just being totally confused and wondering.
Yeah.
Manishana.
Yeah, I have another one. I might photograph and send you what we have and see if we can work through that. It's a Steinhaltz that it's like Talmud for beginners, but you get the sense of how it's written and the topics. I'll look into that and let's see if we can create with the help of Rabbi Norm, something that will address how the discussions were made there. And the other one is Pirkei Avot. It's the
Yeah.
wisdom of our
But
elders.
Pirkei Avot doesn't have a
It's
Gemara.
worthwhile. Yeah.
No, we had great fun with that for a few months and then I don't know.
Yeah.
Said, I can't do this anymore.
Yeah, that's
It was-
that's
but it was really-
understandable.
But it was very interesting because most of people I know have never looked at a Talmud, really don't know what it's about. And that really is
Yeah.
where.
We can,
Yeah,
maybe in the spring or whatever, we can, or even into the fall, we can
Fall,
find a,
maybe.
we can find a time, right?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, separate.
Okay.
Thank you.
That's,
Appreciate
that's
it.
fine, that's fine,
Watch online.
Yes, I know.
yeah, okay.
And we expect you to.
And, it almost seems there are a number of times in this particular portion in Bahar, when we question why did they, the Masoretes, why did they put this sentence and as a different paragraph as opposed to linking it to the previous paragraph? And we even get that with the end of the parsha into the why they did two verses at the end of this parsha that probably would link better to the beginning of the next parsha. And why do they do that? We just don't know. But it certainly would make sense to add verse 18. You shall observe my laws faithfully, keep my rules, that you may live upon the land in security. And as a matter of fact, if you have a version of the Torah or the 5 books of Moses that points out where the aliyot, where the Torah blessings are broken up, so that because traditionally there are 7, they make the break after verse 18, not after verse 17. Verse 17 is where most of our paragraphs
Yeah.
end.
Yeah.
Okay, but
Shlishi.
the
Yeah.
break for the aliyah includes verse 18.
And you should.
Right. So it seems to me that's a better ending.
Hmm.
And I would wonder if we have a better or an interpretive translation for that last phrase, that if you do this, all of the things that I've been talking about, God says, that you may live upon the land in security. And that's lavetach, that's in security, meaning safety. But I'm wondering if there's a better term. You see where I'm going with it?
Yeah, and
Yeah.
and I see where it would go in either
Uh-huh,
direction
okay.
because, and then here in Hertz it says, and secure from the perils of drought and famine. And then it goes on to talk to our talk about agricultural
Right,
stuff.
right. And this commentary
So,
says
you know, break
that
it
people will
down.
not fear invasion.
Hmm.
That's that kind of security.
That's not what it says here, but that's.
No,
Yeah.
well, that's just, like I say, there are different translations. And I'm wondering if we could come up with a word for us. Or a state. Along with security, and a lack of fear, whatever, confidence. But that also reflects all of these things that we've been talking about. That go back to the proclaim liberty phrase, that go back to, that this is the kind of lifestyle that you will have if you remember these laws, these injunctions, these parameters for business, as well as all the things that I talk about for the Sabbaths and the holidays and, and all that. So that phrase always struck out at me of live upon the land in security. Like I said, I'm just throwing these out for discussion if anybody wants to pick up. And if not, I'll tell Marty that I'll talk to Marty.
Or did you
Okay,
pass?
Rabbi Miri, Beth, Michael.
One of the things that happen in modern Hebrew, we use this root to say insurance,
Right.
bitua.
Careful.
So
Very careful.
I would say, for example, that it's promise for sure that you're going to be there. Atem yesontem al haaretz, for sure. You know, trust me. That's what's going to
Okay.
happen.
Okay, but if you do this, I mean, you follow these laws and whatever, and by doing that, it's not just my promise, says God. It's also the confidence, the self-confidence that you will feel for yourselves of living in the land as a just society. That's the way I see it. Beth, then Michael, please.
Well, this safety and security is predicated on everybody acting justly to each other and honestly to each other. And so the question arises, and of course it shows up in Torah often, what happens when somebody does not do the just thing, does not do the honest thing? Because this description it's a perfect world. If everybody was good and honest to each other, then we wouldn't have wars, we wouldn't have altercations, except humans being flawed. I mean, you can strive to be just and honest, each of us, but what happens to all the flawed humans who aren't that way? And that's with a question mark. I don't have an answer to that.
Michael?
I was thinking of the same thing that Beth had just mentioned, and I have another thing that I wanted to mention. In verse from 13 to 17, I kind of look at that as our form of the essence of our Judaism, by having the God that we believe in, and having a God, at least for myself, that keeps me honest, because I know He's watching me. He's watching everything that I do through my life, and I see it as a very important part of my life, the belief in God, that everything that I do in business, out of business, that there's consequences and good things that come from that. So that really gave me a lot of pause to think about this from 13 to 17.
Thank you.
Those
I agree. That's I agree. I think that's what the import of the phrase is, that focusing on people's sense of internal security. I would use the word confidence, but but whatever, as opposed to what this one comment here is, fear of being attacked from outside. That's a different kind of fear, and that's a different kind of security than what I see these phrases referring to. On the other hand, there are those who do say that one of the reasons why historically, traditionally, Israel has been attacked, and I don't mean just the state, I mean the people of Israel has always been attacked, is because, as Beth was implying, is that not enough of us live up to this standard. That there should be this double standard, that we should be living more according to God's word, and since not enough of us are, even up historically, but even up to the present day, there are those who are saying that's why Israel is attacked.
There are those who are saying.
There are those who are saying.
Yeah, Orthodox. That seems to be the Orthodox point of view.
Some
No,
Orthodox,
I'm
not
talking-
all.
I'm talking
Right.
about the extreme.
Yeah.
Now when
Mary?
it said you
that-
shall,
Oh, I'm sorry. Okay, Michael, go ahead, then Mary.
Yeah, I just want to finish this. Thank you very much.
Sorry,
Uh,
sorry.
No, it's okay, honey. You shall observe my laws and faithfully keep my rules. Uh, and as Beth said, I was going to say, well, if you don't observe my laws and rules, there's really nothing there, but it's you see it. If you go against God's laws and rules, what's going to happen? Well, we see it all around us. That's how I see this personally, because we are not, because the Hebrews, the Jews, God gave these laws to us not to take lightly. So there is these unforeseen circumstances and consequences that we now suffer. And I would just say that would be my opinion on that. What I have to say.
Okay. Thank you. Mary?
Well, here we encounter one of the problems of translation, because in this paragraph, it moves from singular to plural, from singular, loto nu, and asita, etc., etc. So we are looking at it, and it's a very complex thing. If we want to, take it apart, what things each one needs to do, and what things the congregation, the community has to do. The last one is as a community. And I remember, for Yom Kippur, when we say Ashamnu, Avinu, etc., when we say it in plural. We say it in plural, and people ask, well, I've never done that. So you speak in the name of the congregation, Beth, that probably someone, at least someone, has done that. It's not me, but someone has done that. So the issue of asking for a law to be pursued by the person, by one person, and to be pursued by the congregation, I always find it very, it's very difficult for me to talk about, while in English you have you. Well, we should start using y'all. But so what you're saying is if one person is doing that, it includes everyone else. So if one person is cheating, the entire congregation is involved, and we can talk about it as we, as a people, how we are involved in the actions of each one of us. That it's, and we say, one person that disappears is as if the entire world, for the value of each individual, while the value of all. And as I said, in English, it's a very difficult topic to talk about.
Yeah, and thematically, we're going to see a little bit later on also that it's not only a matter of each, bless you, of each person doing God's work. It's each person and what is our relationship to the larger community. Kol Yisrael Arivim Zelazeh, that each person's acts reflect on
Right.
the rest of the community. Right. Go ahead.
And the
Jen.
community needs to do something about that person.
Right.
What this reminds me of when I was in school, high school, grade school, and someone in the class was acting up, the teacher would make the whole class pay for that person's naughtiness or whatever was going on,
Sure.
which I always used to resent, because I think I'm not doing anything wrong, but we all have to suffer because of so-and-so. Yeah. So that's a lesson we learned very.
I resented in the class, Gail, I resented in the class, especially when I was a teacher. Why none of you say something about the behavior of this individual?
Right.
You know, just the responsibility is only of the teacher to work with it. So, you can justify that, but I hated also the collective punishment.
Well,
I think all of us as teachers were in that position.
Right.
And I tried to remind myself that when that happened, that if one student did something good or positive, that I would reward the entire class,
I could,
so.
Nobody else did.
No.
No.
I remember
Yeah.
one incident that happened when I was probably freshman or sophomore in high school. And one of the boys had done something wrong. And the whole class had to suffer. And some of the other boys took that boy outside at break and.
Beat him up.
No, I didn't get violent, but the threat was there. So.
Right.
But,
Okay.
I mean, I just want to say one thing, and
You
know,
can say
what we're
more than one thing.
what we're talking about is what's happening to us because of Netanyahu. Our whole class
Right.
is being accused or
Suffering.
for it.
Yeah.
And so I don't know.
No,
That's
you're right.
Yeah, no, we will,
We'll get there.
we will get there. Okay,
Okay.
all right. Let's read, unless somebody has something else new to add. Let's read on, let's go from 18 through 24. Anyone volunteering?
And you shall do my laws and
Okay.
observe my judgments and do them, so you will live on the land in security. And the land will give its fruit, and you will eat to the full, and you will live in security on it. And if you will say, what shall we eat in the 7th year? Here we won't seed and won't gather our produce. I shall command my blessings for you in the 6th year, and I will make the produce for the 3 years. And you will seed the 8th year and eat from the old produce until the 9th year. You will eat the old until its produce comes. But the land shall not be sold permanently, because the land is mine, because you are aliens and visitors with me. And so in all the land in your possession, you shall give a redemption for the land.
Okay. Before we attack this, in a pleasant way, I mentioned last night, and this because I had encountered the term. So, in 19, the land shall yield its fruit, you shall eat your fill, achaltem lasova. And I mentioned last night that the food collection box
Right.
that we have in a lobby, and many synagogues do that. I refer to that as the sova box. That's where I get the term. So if I was saying that if anybody hears me talk about the sova, what's a sova box? Now you know it in context also. Okay. So the logical question is, well, wait a minute, if we're not harvesting in the sabbatical year, how are we supposed to eat? God has an answer. Well, I'll give you twice the produce in year 6. Okay, so that you'll have enough for year 8 and maybe even into year 9, etc. Okay. I do want, there's a comment that I found from Rabbi Baruch Levine. I think Marty has referred to him also as a conservative rabbi. He teaches, I think he's still teaching at Hebrew University in Jerusalem. This is his overriding comment for all of these laws about the Jubilee, the sabbatical and the Jubilee. He says, it's not a matter of morality, theology, or even renewal of the land. It's politics. Okay. This section of Leviticus was probably composed after the return from Babylon, so approximately 420 BCE. The Jubilee meant that the land had to be returned to the original Israelite tribes
Oh, that had gone.
as it was apportioned
Right.
by Joshua.
Right.
Okay, because if all land belongs to God, even when we were in exile, we're still at a Jubilee year time, we're still entitled to return to that land if and when we can.
Okay.
Okay. Therefore, at that time after the return from the Babylonian exile, they wanted to include it in Holy Scripture, the whole process by which the children of Israel, now some stayed in Babylon,
Oh, okay.
right?
Yeah.
Persia, but those who came back, hey, knock on the door. This is my land. God, it's in the documents that predate you're living here, local person. This is still my family, my tribe's position.
Gotcha.
Now, that gives us the entree into, like Amy said earlier, what does this mean about for Palestinians who may have been living on the land in 1920,
Right.
when a major aliyah came? Okay, we don't have an issue with those pieces of property where the Jewish National Fund, it wasn't called that at the beginning, it was Karen Kayemet LeYisrael, when they actually purchased, and they have the documents that show that they actually purchased the lands. We're not necessarily talking about that, even though, again, the Torah would say it's not really a purchase, it's a rental, or it's a lease, but that's a fair, just arrangement. But on the other hand, there are those who believe, if you're following the Torah, that since this land was given by God and apportioned out by Joshua in perpetuity to the descendants of the children of Israel, along comes a Jubilee year and bye-bye to whoever is living there. That's our tradition. I rest my case.
Interesting.
And before Joshua divided it, who had it then?
Well, we would say it's still God, and God can determine
It's God's land.
it's God's land. So God determined and actually made sure that it was written down that this tribe lives here, this tribe lives there, this tribe lives there, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And if we believe in God, and if we accept Torah as our life's guideline, we are entitled to live there. Okay, who wants to
Dive in, folks.
who wants to jump in? Go ahead, Amy.
Well, when I was in Jordan, I met a Palestinian. He was a biology professor at the university.
Wait, excuse
And
me a second. I just
very
want to say
interesting.
hello. Good morning
Spent the
to
day with him.
morning,
It's
Sue.
very interesting to hear.
I'm sorry. I just wanted to welcome
Suzanne.
Suzanne. I saw the name there. No picture, but I saw the name. I just wanted to welcome her. Hi. Okay, go ahead, Amy. Sorry to interrupt.
Welcome, Suzanne. That's okay. So, of course, I fired a lot of questions at him about the Palestinian perspective, because he was moved out of Israel, forced out of his home, and was really sad about that, and said that he and his family would go back from time to time and have a picnic on their former property. So my question is, in the Jubilee year, if property is supposed to go back to its latest owner, wouldn't some of that property have to be restored to the Palestinians if they were the former owner?
Well, two things would be my answer. One is that I question whether it says the latest owner or whether the understanding is the original owner.
Which would be God.
Okay.
But the original owner could be deceased.
God's
Well,
alive.
the original owner, the person could be deceased, but the family lineage, if documented,
So
could,
it would
could
go back to
still be
an
there.
Israeli.
And again, that's the way that traditionalists would pick up on your question. Okay. But I would also wonder, I guess, I'm not challenging, I'm wondering the story that your Palestinian colleague or the person that you was the professor you were talking to, who says my family and I were forced out of our land, of our home, whatever. I wonder what does that mean? Does that mean that they voluntarily chose to leave? Does it mean that their governing authorities said, leave now because of the battle, the ensuing battles, and as soon as we win the war, you'll be able to come back? Does that mean that Jewish Israeli soldiers came to their door and knocked down the door and said, you must leave? So I don't know what he meant by we were forced to leave, if indeed he still was able to come, he and his family were still be able to come back to picnic on the land that you were saying.
That's very interesting. This was in the year 2000.
Okay, so it's after a peace agreement with Jordan. Okay.
And at that time, there was an enormous population of Palestinians in Jordan, in Amman, and they built apartment complexes for them. And it was nearly bankrupting Jordan because Jordan is a poor country and they just didn't have the resources for thousands and thousands of Palestinians coming into their country. He didn't tell me how he was forced out, but I know that he and his family were one of the refugees that ended up in Amman, Jordan.
Okay, all right, because there
That's
are
all I know.
there are different narratives.
Yes.
There are different narratives, and which means there are different truths with a small t, not a capital T. But there are different truths that people and families tell through the generations of what happened. Were there cases where local Palestinians again were told by Israeli soldiers that they had to leave their homes and their towns? Yes. Were there people who voluntarily left because the Arab and Palestinian and Jordanian and whatever authorities told them they should leave?
Because there was going to be a war.
Because there was going to be a war? Yes. Again, there are different narratives in telling the story, and in how the story then and the emotions thereof, how the story gets passed on from generation to generation, and what it means. And frankly, that's the one of the underlying difficulties when you talk about any kind of a peace agreement, is
Right.
people are coming from with different narratives and different truths.
Well, sadly, Emad and I never sorted out this question of how he was forced out or why he thinks he was forced out. And that'd be very interesting, but I've lost touch with him.
And one of the interesting or sad questions, we can't answer it, is that would your friend, would he harbor resentment towards Israel if he and his family had been more warmly accepted by the Jordanians?
He told me, he was so sad about this, and he told me that he and fellow Palestinians lived side by side with Israelis. They were good friends, they attended weddings, they interacted more than just neighbors.
They came to
They
each
were
other.
a community.
Absolutely.
And that was part of his sense of loss, as well as. And so I have a feeling he would not harbor any hostilities towards Israelis because he had such a pleasant, a thoroughly good relationship with them growing up.
Yeah. And that, what you're describing, and the realities of what happened in 47, 48, that piece of the narrative, that piece of the history, you don't hear that talked about on college campuses today.
No.
You don't
No,
hear
you
that
don't.
talked about, in the news as giving perspective into how we might, God willing, be able to resolve the conflicts in the Middle East. That piece has been lost to history, unfortunately. Yeah, go ahead, Gail.
I've always-
Gail, then.
Oh, sorry. I've always wondered what would have happened if Jordan and Syria
And Egypt.
and
right.
Egypt had not attacked and started a war. Okay, just
You mean the War of Independence?
the War of Independence. If they had not attacked, would the Palestinians who were living there in Israel stayed? It was just because I met a lot of Israeli Arabs. They're citizens of Israel, but they happen to be, and they're very happy. They're very content, and for the most part, they're treated fairly equally.
Well, they're not so happy when the Iranians are
No.
sending missiles at them,
No.
but okay,
No,
right.
for sure. So, and it's like when Hamas attacked Israel, that upsets the apple cart totally. Okay. And that's what happened at the War of Independence. Had there not been a war, I'm just wondering how it would look today as opposed to, in a whole.
Gail, I'm sorry, Gail, I'm sorry to stop you there because you start your comments at a certain point in history, and there is history that goes there. The Brits were there, and all that needs to be learn, study, and see what's going on. This is so political, complex. That just said, oh, first we lived in harmony, and then I don't know what happened, and we started shooting at each other. So we need to be very cautious about that. We need to learn what happened, and we need to learn, like during the 6-Day War, the Jordanians would say, stay at home, King Hussein, don't get involved, but he didn't listen. So all these pieces need to be included when we discuss about the situation that was resulted in what's going on today and yesterday and 50 years ago. No, 76 years ago.
I certainly didn't mean to imply that it's a land of peace forever, because it's never, I think there's been very few periods of time when it was a land of peace, but
Sure, right.
we were talking about the Palestinians in particular.
Okay, yeah, please.
Okay, I don't know, maybe this is a confusion because of the media. But I have always pictured the Palestinians living in camps Because that's what they showed for years and years and years and I kept wondering, why don't they, move someplace? Why don't they get out of the camps? Were they satisfied with the camps? And whether you're talking about the apartment buildings, Amy, or, it's, I picture people going on with their lives and finding employment of some sort and not living in hovels or tents because have been tossed out and doing that for years and years and years and years and years and decades and decades. I mean, and I don't, and maybe I was just picturing that because that's the kind of thing that I saw on television or, but so I'm
Well,
not sure how.
no, what you're describing of the hundreds of thousands into the millions of refugees living in camps in poverty, with all of that. Israel continuously gets blamed for that,
Yeah.
but those camps wouldn't have existed if the other Arab nations would have accepted and resettled the refugees like Israel resettled the refugees that were kicked out of Iran, Iraq, Syria, all of those. But Israel welcomed them, acculturated them, acclimated them, and welcomed them as citizens. If the Palestinian refugees had been welcomed into, again, we have to remember, if you're talking about the Middle East area, that Israel and the surrounding area, Israel is probably the size of this cell phone, and all the surrounding area that's all Arab, it is the rest of the table.
Mhm.
There certainly was room for all of those refugees to go
And jobs.
and be accepted, and whatever. But since they said no, as like they had been sending the message, no, 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 we don't want any Israel at all. So just wait in these camps. We're going to destroy Israel, and then you go back to your homes quickly. But then it's lasted for 75 years.
So they were their pawns, not ours.
Political pawns.
Right. I mean, and anytime that Israel, and I plead non-objectivity here. Okay, I admit it, all right, that anytime that Israel has said, okay, to this group of Palestinians, whether it's a small area, whether it's the entire Gaza Strip, here, we will leave, you can have self-determination. And whenever that has happened, it has wound up ultimately that the radicals and the terrorists with corrupt government, whether it's in Gaza, whether it's in the West Bank, that they've taken over. They've misused all the funds that came from the United Nations. They've misused the trust that Israel may have placed in them and trying to work together. And it's just been a horrible situation, not only for Israel, but it's been a horrible situation for those hundreds of thousands, if not millions, of Palestinian refugees. And when you start to think over generations on both sides of generations, how do you even conceive of rebuilding trust? Through
Rabbi Norm, Rabbi Norm,
Please.
I'm sure I must say this. Michael, excuse me just a second. When a couple comes to you because they are fighting all the time, and the husband says, this I learned from my teacher, and the husband said, only if she changed, then everything will be okay. Only if the Arabs absorb the Palestinians, everything was okay. It's not my responsibility. And then, and then that's the question we ask. Why not all these countries absorb the Plitim, the refugees, And Israel says, yeah, they should do it. Now, what Israel can and should do, we don't ask that question because it's not very convenient. I'm sorry. It's not very convenient to see all the settlements that are exacerbating what things are happening. So, and I cannot say that my Israeliyut is in my neshama. I'm suffering from a trauma now that cannot be explained. But we cannot continue saying, look how much sand Saudi Arabia has and oil, why didn't do anything? Or the question, why these Palestinians didn't do anything? We have to start thinking of our responsibility because we cannot do anything about the other's responsibility. Dibarti.
No, tada. And certainly, I don't want to imply that responsibility, blame, or involvement in finding a solution is only on their side.
No,
I don't want to imply that at all. I'm only putting it in the context of Bev's questions about where the refugees came from, not talking about what has
I know.
happened.
I know.
Michael,
I know.
please.
I know. Thank you.
Michael, please.
This is probably a far stretch, but I was thinking about the encampments on all the universities today, what we've seen the past number of weeks. And why would they dismantled? Why would all these encampments dismantled? And the way I understand it is because of they started to become violent. So something had to be done about it. And I think this is their nature, unfortunately. It also has to do with erasing history. Because I've been watching this very, very carefully, and I hear with all the supporters of the Palestinian cause, I hear nothing about Hamas, and I hear nothing about what started this whole thing was 10/7/2023. No mention about that. And what I come up with is the reason they don't mention that is just to focus on the Palestinians and to erase what happened, to erase what happened on 10/7/2023, to erase it, to get it out of everybody's mind and memory and like it never happened. This is how I see this whole thing.
In many, hang on a second, Amy. In Michael, in many ways, I agree with you. What I'm seeing and what I'm hearing and reading, I would say that when you talk about encampments as opposed to demonstrators, when you talk protesters, when you talk about those who are promoting violence, as opposed to those who are affirming free speech. Okay? I think there is a distinction. It seems clear to me from what I read and what I hear from various sources, including people that from university where I used to teach also, talking to that faculty, that much of the violent or the violent oriented protesters, demonstrators, those who are building the encampments, interesting how many of the tents were provided for them and things like that. That at least 25, if not up to 40% of the people there are not from the campuses.
Right, they're not.
They're out, what, I guess the phrase, I don't know, it's crazy for me to be saying this, to think back to 1968, but outside agitators, right? Okay. And I think it was Marty and Sue Cohn actually in a conversation who gave me this kind of insight. You can agree with it or disagree with it, however you want. In just a couple weeks ago, after the weekend when the Israelis assassinated Iranians in Amman or Damascus, whichever it was, I forget. And then the Iranians missed 300 missiles and drones overnight, and then the Israelis did a symbolic attack on an airbase, etc. That Iran said, we have a major surprise coming for the United States, if you remember that. They didn't say that it was a military attack. They just said that it was a major surprise. And there are a number of people who wonder if the coordination of all of this violence and whatever on college campuses is indeed sponsored by Iran. And that's the attack that they were forecasting. Just a thought to put it out there. I don't know.
It's been it has always been my belief, Rabbi, that all of this is sponsored by Iran. Iran is an employer, and Hamas Iran is the employer. Hamas are employees of Iran. All these agitators are employed by Iran. They're trained and they get all their training there. And why do they go to the college campuses? Is because these young college students, they're looking for some identity. They're easily persuaded. That's why their college professors are able to tell them who to vote for, what party. They teach it because they look up to the college professor and they believe it. They don't do their own research. And so, but Iran is.
I might debate that with you, but
Right. Really behind this whole thing.
Granted that many of the students are conflating the different story, what they're told and are not aware of all of the background. They just hear the one catchphrase and they go from there. Okay, anyone else?
Well, I just want one more point. When you talk about freedom, I believe in free speech, just like all of us. However, you have to also keep in mind that freedom comes with some responsibility. It has to. You just can't go out just do what you want to do because it's free. It's actually not free because there has to be a responsibility that is attached to freedom. All freedoms.
Which is a life lesson. It's not necessarily that you can just tell people or preach about it. People have to experience it. Okay, all right. Let's go back to the text. So where did we go?
I read down to.
Did we read it from 18?
Yes.
I read that, yes.
Okay.
I went to. I think 20, I think I got to 20.
Oh, okay, so I just, yeah, you went through 24.
24, I read 24.
Right, okay. So I wanted to share one more comment from one of the teachers of Bible whom I studied with in Jerusalem. I'm sure that Steve Marin did also. Nechama Leibovich taught at Hebrew University, and I was fortunate enough to take a graduate level course with her, but some of you may remember, because our kids or our grandchildren all did the year abroad, a year at the Hebrew University. And I think many students did that. And the required class in Bible. I don't know, Miri, did you ever study with Nechama?
No, unfortunately not.
Okay, Nechama Leibovich, she would give the required class in Bible. And so like I said, I was privileged to take a graduate class with her, but this was the way that she summarized these last couple paragraphs that we were talking about. That this is intended to prevent the evolving of a landless class on the one hand, and the concentration of wealth, power, and property in the hands of the few. Okay, that this to make sure that everyone, even if your family had been slaves and homeless, that there would come a time when you would be back in the mainstream society, no better, no worse than even someone who owned the property on which you lived, or who was your master when you were a slave. Okay. That all those distinctions and classes would only exist for a certain period of time, a finite period of time, and then like I said, we hit the reset button and we get to start all over again. Okay. Verse 39. Maybe 39 through where are we? Through that's a long last sentence. Through 46.
You're in
I
25.
thought we stopped at 25.
Oh, I'm sorry, I turned too many pages.
That's okay.
Okay, we did. We stopped at 24. So go back to verse 25. Right.
I even know where you guys are.
You even know where we are? I had the wrong page of my notes. I'm impressed, Les. I'm impressed.
He's nodding away tonight. Thanks with him.
Okay, so
You read that.
If thy brother be waxen poor, I don't know what
Whoa.
waxen means.
what waxing poor?
That's what it says here. This is Hertz. All right,
Really?
the other side, okay. I lost okay, and sell some of his possession. Then shall his kinsman that is next unto him come. I know,
Nearest relative.
Closest
Right,
I know, the English here is.
right.
Makes me crazy. And shall redeem that which his brother hath sold. And if a man, far do I go? And if,
Go
if a
to
man,
28 at least.
okay, and if a man have no one to redeem it, and he be waxen rich, and find sufficient means to redeem it, then let him count the years of the sale thereof, and restore the overplus unto the man whom he sold it, and he shall return unto his possession. But if he have not, sufficient,
He waxes
has
stuff?
not.
Okay.
If he have not sufficient means to get it back for himself, then that which he hath sold shall remain in the hand of him that hath bought it until the year of the Jubilee, and in the Jubilee it shall go out, and he shall return unto his possession.
Good. That was,
Somehow that's real confusing to me.
Somehow,
we have some other books you could read.
right, yeah.
I know, but this is the one I have at home, so
Oh.
that's good.
I mean, it does seem like a simple transaction, that if you can afford to buy the property, you know, fine. And if not, if you have a close relative who can pitch in or buy it for you, you know, that's fine. you know, whatever, but even if you don't, if you don't, be reminded that at the Jubilee year, you're gonna be able to go back to your holding anyway. Right?
So you can stay in.
Okay,
the
like I said,
camp
I'm not an
until then.
economics major. So, nor do I have a real estate license.
And I don't know what waxing means.
Right, and waxing. There's
Is
no,
there anything,
right, it must be a British. It must be a British thing.
Is it? Okay,
Cause I don't know anything
British
in the
law.
Hebrew that would,
no. it's-
okay,
Hurts.
oh, it hurts.
yeah, that's that.
Wax and poor, only dire poverty would induce an Israelite to part with his family heritage.
That's
Okay.
the part you should have read.
That's.
Yeah.
Next time I'll read the notes.
Yeah, there you go.
Okay. Are there questions or comments on that waxen paragraph?
Did everybody
We
understand?
shouldn't be making fun of Chief Rabbi Joseph Hertz,
Okay, we won't,
right?
no,
Okay, you wanna read it from this one instead?
go ahead, you.
How about from 29 through 34? Beth, please.
And if a man sell a dwelling house in a walled city, then he may redeem it within a whole year after it is sold. For a full year shall he have the right of redemption. And if it be not redeemed within the space of a full year, then the house that is in the walled city shall be made sure in perpetuity to him that bought it throughout his generations. It shall not go out in the Jubilee. But the houses of the villages who have no wall round about them shall be reckoned with the fields of the country. They may be redeemed, and they shall go out to, they shall go out in the Jubilee. That's really interesting that if it's in a walled city, that means that there's no farmland. But if it's outside,
Right.
where it's agricultural, the rules are different.
City versus a village.
Right.
Right. Mhm.
Do you want me to go further?
Please.
But as for the cities of the Levites, the houses of the cities of their possession, the Levites shall have a perpetual right of redemption. Are you listening, David? David?
Goat is part of the Torah, right? Okay.
Okay, we got the
Right.
Levite over here.
Right?
And if a man purchase of the Levites, then the house that was sold in the city of his possession shall go out in the Jubilee. For the houses of the cities of the Levites are their possession, hang on, page turning, among the children of Israel. But the fields of the open land about their cities may not be sold, for that is their perpetual possession.
Okay. So throughout Jewish law, there's a difference between what happens within, they call it a walled city, but it literally just means a designated urban area.
Mhm.
Of course, they were all walled for protection, anyway. Or out in the rural, in the small villages, or just the farms, et cetera, et cetera. Okay. But again, joking aside, there are special benefits for the Levites, fringe benefits. Anything? Okay, we changed the context just a little bit as of verse 35. So 35 through 38.
Do you want me to keep going?
Sure, that's fine, thank you.
Okay, and if thy brother be waxen poor, and his means fail with thee, then thou shalt uphold him. As a stranger and a settler shall he live with thee. Take thou no interest of him or increase, but fear thy God, that thy brother may live with thee. Thou shalt not give him thy money upon interest, nor give him thy victuals for increase. I am the Lord your God, who brought you forth out of the land of Egypt, to give you the land of Canaan to be your God.
Okay, so now we're in a little bit of a different context. Now we're specifically talking about our relations with relatives. Okay, this says your kinsman. The Hebrew is achicha, is your brother, which meant brother or sister, but okay. So here, the comment here from the Eitz Chaim, which is the conservative movement's commentary. Literally, the Hebrew is if your relative, if your kinsman being in dire straits, if your kinsman stumbles, is literally the Hebrew. This prompted the sages to comment that it is easier to support a person and hold him or her up when the person first begins to stumble than it is to pick the person up after he or she has fallen. It's easier to prevent poverty than to cure it.
Yeah.
Right.
Now,
So
what you call
it's a proactive,
waxing is,
proactive situation. Yes, Miri, I'm sorry.
yeah. Kiyamur means that if it gets impoverished, mak is the poverty thing. So if it gets into that point, which Heidi said, waxing or whatever, yamur is if it becomes poor. It's in a verb. It's not an adjective or an adverb. If he, as you said, if he is falling, but the idea is if he lost everything. And I just want to move forward to a very, very, very problematic verses that are coming up that someone should translate.
Or soon afterwards?
It's after this, inside the, it's verse 36, and well, what you need to do is to bring him into yourself and treat him as an alien or something and be nice to him. But what comes now, it's, you know, nesech and ribit.
Right. Okay. All right. So this becomes the source of what in some of you may be familiar with in olden Jewish communities, they called the Gemilut Chasadim or Gemilus Chasadim,
Right.
Or the Hebrew Free Loan a society or something like that, of not charging interest to your family member, but you know, let him live by your side as your kinsman. So even for a ger toshav, even for someone else who's living in the community, a resident alien, if you will, you do not charge interest, do not lend money with interest, do not give him food with accrued interest. And again, putting into the context of, I am the Lord, your God, brought you out of the land of Egypt to be your God, et cetera, et cetera. But this is kind of
the reason I'm emphasizing this, Rab Norman, is because this is one of the things that has been a source of anti-Semitism.
Mhm.
That God says you should not take ribit. Ribit means adding to that, and nesech, as Rabbi Tom explained, is that from the beginning, you know, if you want $10, I'm going to give you only 8. I'm going to beat some of it at the beginning. And this is not something, you know how people take stuff out of context, and this is one of them, I believe, that has been said, oh, look at the Jews, they take this how become millionaires and so forth. So it has been, in my mind, problematic. It wasn't Isur. It was forbidden to do that. And I think that they remove who to whom and they put it as is. Troubles.
Okay. Beth, please.
Oh, I just wanted to talk about waxing. We talk about the moon waxing and waning. And so we're talking about it being in the process of growing larger, growing smaller in our sight. And so the idea, as Miri pointed out, that you don't wait until somebody is in deeper distress than they're already in, that you can step in and that you can help them, and also not take advantage of them in their weakness. And I think that's really important. Nowadays, we call it being proactive.
Exactly, exactly.
Okay, oh, sorry.
Go ahead, no, go ahead.
Okay.
Just because you're sitting at the table.
At the head table, yeah. Okay, it's, and I'm guessing, this is a historical whatever. Why were Jews, the only ones who could make loans, charge interest, or it's kind of like you're forced into something that you're told not to
That's
do.
exactly, that's exactly, it was
Because you had no other choices.
because the governments and the civil authorities knew that this would become a source of resentment. A cause of resentment for people if they're charging interest. So the only ones who will allow, we're not going to allow the Christians to do it. The Jews will be allowed. It'll be one of the occupations that we do allow them to have. Knowing that it's going to cause such anger.
Good politics.
Yeah,
Politics.
right. I don't know if David wants to go into a Shakespeare lecture about all of this, but
Yeah.
it's certainly
Glad.
what we all are simply understanding. You're muted, David.
Only in that, the famous Shylock speech in The Merchant of Venice, the quality of mercy is not strained. It droppeth as the gentle rain from heaven upon the place beneath. It is twice blessed. It blesseth him that gives and him that takes. A very fine speech that's near the end of Merchant of Venice.
Yeah.
Right, thanks. Okay, all right. So we're all aware of that. I want to add some commentary to the phrase that kind of the rabbis focus on, not so much the way we are, but they take it in a different direction. So at the end of verse 35, the Hebrew is v'chayimach, that that he will live, again, the one who's in dire straits, the one who's waxing poor or whatever, okay? Let him live by your side. So be aware, be ready to help, proactive as we were saying. But the Talmud goes into a whole different discussion, and it's a famous one. Some of you may have heard it or studied it, or done it in some other kind of values clarification course, or whatever. But the source in the Talmud is a teaching of Rabbi Akiva, right? The question is that if there are two men in the desert, they only have enough water for one of them to stay alive. Okay. What are you supposed to do? Do you give it to your neighbor and you'll die yourself? Do you share it, recognizing that both of you might die? Or do you drink it yourself and allow your neighbor, kinsman, the one who's waxing poor, whatever, to die on his or her own? And what's Rabbi Akiva's answer? Anyone know? Because it might not
One
be,
person drinks,
it might not be what you think.
one person should drink.
Yeah, which one?
The one that holds the bottle.
Exactly.
I think
Exactly.
the answer is that you both dig deeper for more.
Yeah, maybe you can dig a little bit. No, but Akiva's answer is that if it comes to that, if only one person is going to live, it's you yourself. Okay,
Well, you're not allowed to commit suicide.
you're not allowed to
Giving it
commit,
away,
you're
what
not
are you
allowed to
doing?
commit suicide with certain exceptions.
Good,
There are definitely,
That's good.
there are exceptions.
all right.
Okay, this is not
Do
necessarily
Hashem. Yeah.
one. But this is in commenting on that particular phrase, v'chai imach, that he should live by you. We talked last week that there's this overriding phrase, v'chai bahem, that these are my commandments, live by them, don't die because of them,
Oh, okay.
right?
Yeah.
This is twisted around a little bit. And ultimately, the rabbis are not, if you look up at the whole discussion, they're not happy about this, but they realize that ultimately, if you had to make the decision, sadly, tragically, you choose to live yourself. If anyone wants to comment or disagree with Rabbi Akiva, I won't tell them that you disagree.
The Talmud, oh boy.
Okay?
It's a dilemma.
It is a dilemma.
Yeah.
It is a dilemma. You know, I mean, we've done it in we used to do it with the teens at leadership camp, if there's only space in the lifeboat, there's only space for 5 people, but there are 7 who need to get in. And okay, let's do, what are the different occupations and how many, males, how many females, and different, how many are young, how many are old, and, and get into all of that. But again, you might not think that this would be the principle for Jewish thinking. But it is, at least according to Akiva.
I'll have to think about that one for a while.
Well, you're supposed to, that's what the Talmud requires.
Exactly, and absolutely, because the dissenting opinions are all included.
Yeah.
Okay, so, and they're included respectfully,
Mhm.
but they are.
Minority opinion. Minority opinion is put based on this, that even when it's not agreeable to the, there is a way that they do that, but the minority is put down. I always love that. And it's mainly between Hillel and Shammai, and they put Shammai, who was more strict, they did put him there. And that's what the Supreme Court does. So, so in 10 years, they'll realize that the minority was right.
Frequently. Yeah. So, and then my other comment would be, again, that notice that the biblical author, however we want to understand that phrase, the biblical author in verse 38 comes back to remind all of us that all of these call them values, whatever you want to call it, all of these experiences must be understood in context that I am your God. I brought you out of the land of Egypt. I give you the land of Canaan, and I will continue to be your God. Right. So there's this context, to it, again, from Eitz Chaim, to remind us that we owe all that we have to God and dare not keep it all for ourselves.
So the land was really not freely, was not given to us freely. The price we have to pay is we've got to hold.
That's part of the,
Yeah.
part of the breed, part of the contract,
That's the
part of the covenant.
That's the covenant.
Yes. Right.
This is right.
Well,
Okay,
God owns the
yes,
land,
Beth,
you can eat
please.
the fruit.
Oh, there's a lovely hymn by the Appalachian songwriter Gene Ritchie called "The Cool of the Day," and it's God saying, "I'm glad you like my garden, and you can live here under certain situations. Basically, you need to keep the water clean, the garden green, the people free." But in each verse, he says, "And I will return in the cool of the day." And by the end of the song, he's saying, "Now is the cool of the day." And so we are essentially, God is our landlord. And
Right.
we have certain duties in tending the world to be able to live in it. Okay.
Thanks. Anything else here? All right, let's try one more long paragraph. 39 through, well, that's where I was doing before. 39 through 46. Any volunteers to read? Okay, Grace, please.
All right. If your kinsman under you continues in straits and must give himself over to you, do not subject him to the treatment of a slave. He shall remain with you as a hired or bound laborer. He shall serve with you only until the Jubilee year. Then he and his children with him shall be free of your authority. He shall go back to his family and return to his ancestral holding. For they are my servants, whom I freed from the land of Egypt. They may not give themselves over into servitude. You shall rule over him ruthlessly. You shall fear your God. Such male and female slaves as you may have, it is from the nations round about you that you may acquire male and female slaves. You may also buy them from among the children of aliens resident among you, or from their families that are among you, whom they begot in your land. These shall become your property. You may keep them as a possession for your children after you, for them to inherit as property for all time. Such you may treat as slaves. But as for your Israelite kinsmen, no one shall rule ruthlessly over the other.
Okay, so there is a different law and pattern for members of the tribe as opposed to those from the other nations that that surround you or that living there. The Hebrew phrase, incidentally, that Grace's translation as mine talks about ruling ruthlessly, right? The rabbis or the commentators wonder about that phrase. The word only appears one other time in the entire Bible.
Oh, really?
Yeah. So they argue about what it really means, and most of them try to see it as because again, it's accepted that you can have slaves.
Right.
All right. The question is how you treat those slaves. So they understood that Hebrew phrase of lo tirded, don't govern them or don't rule over them. Befarech, they translate as ruthlessly or sadistically, or punish them needlessly, things like that. I mean, it's so you can have slaves, but don't be ruthless about it.
Freeman says,
Yeah,
do
yeah.
harshness.
Do not dominate with harshness. Right. Okay. All right.
Yeah. And there are slaves. We know that there are slaves, and there is a difference between one of us, an Hebrew slave, and one that does not belong to Israel. So the rules are a bit different there. So this is interesting that one of the things is don't make it work with the word that was used to talk about how the Egyptians treated Israel, baparech, that they make them that do. Another thing that I want to put here before we're going to finish at one point is on verse 44. There is a word that's called hagoim, goy. And today we use the word goy in despise, or don't use the word goy, but agoim is other nations. And we should remember that in the Torah, when they say hagoim, they mean not Israel, but other nations. It's not a bad word. It's not demeaning the nature of this. So I think it's important to see that in the context, how we change the meanings of words. We do the same about chariots or shekets, and we use shikse, and we use goy, and basically in the Torah, that's not the intention. So just that.
Sometimes you see the translation as Gentiles. But
Right.
Right. Grace, then Michael.
Yeah, I'm thinking that this is, a humanitarian treatment of all, and whether they're your laborers, your employees, your kinsmen or not. Perhaps the introduction to the Geneva Convention, yet to come in the future at this point. That's all I wanted to say. Thank you.
Okay, Michael, please.
It's hard for me to imagine that the Israelites would use the word slave rather than worker because of the past history. I think that I would tend to use the word worker and not the word slave. And of course, I don't know the Hebrew.
Well, the Hebrew is the same word that we translate as slaves, but you're right. It also means laborers, servants. Yeah, it's all the same. It's the same Hebrew word that has different implications in context.
Well, as you said, the way they were treated, they were the slave or the worker was really part of the family. They were treated very well, like a member of the family. They were not beaten. They were not.
You're right. I think that's the distinction, and that's why it says it. And the verb, as Miri was pointing out, also is that the phrase is there twice in that paragraph. Is that yes, you're entitled to have slaves, labor, indentured servants, whatever phrase makes better sense for you, but you may not treat them ruthlessly or
also, isn't there a 7-year rule applied to them that they would work for 7 years or something to that effect, and then they would leave with certain belongings, which certainly does not a slave would not have gotten that type of treatment.
Now you have a conflict between this paragraph that says they are your indentured servants, they are your avadim eternally, and back in Exodus, where there's the opportunity for a slave, to, with working with the master to offer himself as a permanent, part of the thing, and that boring a hole in their earlobe and all those. Again, it would be cited as example either of different times that those parts of the Torah were written, or different authors who had different understanding of what the servitude might mean. Yeah. Sue?
The way I was taught was, and my translation says, bondman, that the Israelite was not permitted to become a bondman, and that after in the year of the Jubilee, then that was it. They had to go back home or whatever. But a bondman would be for the Gentile, and if they liked where their job and their master and all, then and they wanted to be permanently indentured, I guess we could say, to that particular household, then, like you said, they would get their ear pierced.
Right.
And I think in many cases they were even given an earring, but that bondman did not apply to the Israelites. And I think the reason is because the Israelites, in a sense, were all indentured to God, that they were his chosen people, and that they could not pledge themselves to anyone else but to God. And therefore, anything that would contradict that idea would not be allowed. But for a Gentile, I mean, we're kind of freewheeling spirits here. And we may or may not submit to God. I mean, hopefully we do, but I mean, there's a good chance that many won't. So it didn't matter.
Right. Again, I think they're struggling with the differences between, whether an Israelite, it could happen that an Israelite wanted to make this kind of a pledge to stay with a family and not return to their home possession.
Yeah, but they were not that.
Household, I'd rather stay even if it means being indentured.
Yeah,
And
but
so there was this physical sign that they had made that pledge. So
yeah, but they can't do it. That's against
they're different
that's
scenarios.
against the law. Yeah.
Right, right. Bondman might imply that there's a certain amount of compensation as opposed to
Yeah.
slavery. That's what Michael was saying.
Right.
There's, a
Yeah.
laborer,
Oved is, yeah,
is compensated, and a slave where the owner reaps the only benefit.
Yeah, a bondman did
Yeah.
have certain status associated with that position.
Mhm.
I like to think of it like being a foreman or a supervisor, or, something like that.
Maybe. Yeah, within
Yeah.
within the household, right.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Free to come and go. But still always under the employ and the protection of the owner.
Right.
Whereas the Israelites were always under the protection of God.
And then of course you get into the question, and we need a scholar of early American history
Yes.
of why slavery without the opportunity of redemption was so strong in the early days of this country, if indeed they believed so strongly in the biblical context.
Yeah, well, I think that the slave owners back then broke away from the word of God. I mean, they may have told themselves otherwise, but
Oh, yeah.
in reality, they just were not practicing. Well, they
My,
claim
the
to
little,
be
the
Christian.
side comment here was they still do, right?
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Just the two words as it applies to another human being is owner and slave. Those two words are very distasteful when it applies to another human being. It's just pretty awful, the way I see it.
Right, granted.
Yeah,
Granted.
I agree. Yeah. Now, there is another word in Hebrew for a person that works for money. So, and it's not slave, it's sahir. It's someone that gets maskoret, that gets
Salary.
paid.
Salary,
Yeah,
yeah, right,
salary. Yeah.
yeah. Okay.
Also,
Um,
the word slave,
Yeah.
people say he's a slave to his job, he's a slave to a particular situation, and when they talk like that, it really it displays a very very negative situation.
Mhm.
Yeah. You know what, Michael? I used to ask my kids, I said, what's the difference between a slave and your mom? I mean, I work from morning to evening and I wash and I clean and I did so. So what's the difference between us trying to get to the point of belonging? And interesting enough, the word husband is someone who belongs, someone that has someone that belongs to the other person. Anyway, that was just the.
Well, it depends on the person, the couple, the situation. It depends how one treats another.
Yeah, I'm talking about language only.
Oh, language.
Okay, I'm gonna make the exclusive domain decision that we'll finish there. Again, I'm sure that Marty has a lot of things that he wants to add within this whole context, so I don't want to conclude it totally. We'll allow for him next time. We do have a worship service here next Saturday morning, so there won't be the Torah study. And in 2 weeks, I won't be able to be here. The assumption is that Marty will.
Yeah.
So with
Steve
all
will.
that,
Or Mary?
or Steve or Mary or or someone. Marty just had a bad
I
day yesterday
prefer Steve.
with some tests at the hospital, and he just was a little too pooped to be with us this morning. So he asked me to kind of facilitate.
Excuse me, everyone. Excuse me. Does anyone knows what's happening with Don?
With
Donald.
Don is
We
no
haven't
longer
seen him
a
for
member
a
of the
while.
temple. He's no longer a member of the temple, but he told us that he would participate when he could.
Oh, okay.
Please,
Okay.
Amy, please.
Don Burke is a member of another congregation, Unitarian congregation out of Amato.
Yeah. But he did say that he would, that he didn't feel alienated from this group at all, and that that he would. Yeah. Okay. Yes, Michael.
Yes, tomorrow morning there'll be a bagel breakfast at the temple, and I will be worshiping the piano starting at 9:30 to 10.
But you're not a slave to the piano.
I just thought I'd throw it in for good measure.
Right. A good measure and beats and rest of it.
Maybe several measures.
Okay, all right. And again, I want to remind people that this week we'll be commemorating Yom HaShoah, the Holocaust Memorial, and then the following week is Israel's Yom HaZikaron, Memorial Day, and then Yom HaAtzmaut. And between the 12th and the 19th, so that's Mother's Day till the following Sunday, the entire Tucson community is participating in Israel's solidarity. So if you need information about some of those activities and the observances and the meetings, et cetera, we have information here at the temple or also through the JCC website.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah, one more.
One final comment from me, Rabbi, thank you very much. For the past number of months, I've been in discussion over at the JCC in regards to doing a fundraiser for Israel. It's very, very difficult for me to get through. I've been in discussion in particular with a lady by the name of Abby Cook.
Right.
And if any of you know, have any influence at the JCC who could help me accomplish this, I would appreciate it.
I will be glad. I talk to Amy on a regular basis. Abby.
Yeah,
Abby. I talk to her on a regular basis. I'll be glad to pass on the message, Michael. There is during that week, I know they are doing an evening that's specifically labeled as entertainment, as an Israeli-oriented musical entertainer and fundraising. So I know that they are doing, I don't remember exactly which night that is or afternoon, but they are doing that. But I'll mention again your interest in helping out with it.
yeah. Just one thing. I'm not interested in doing my performance with any other performance. I'm not interested. I want to do this on my own, doing it a separate performance from any other thing that's going on there. So I'm open for preferably on some Sunday that is available to me, to make it understood. Any
Okay.
Sunday that would be available for me, I could do that, but I need time, a lot of time in advance, because I'm going to do this with my trio and get other artists involved in it. So, and I already, Abby Cook came to my home already, so she knows what I do.
Okay, well, maybe we'll just plan on setting it up for here,
What?
that we would set it up to host it here and invite the Tucson people, but
No, it's too small. I thought about that. The JCC would be perfect for me because I want to raise some meaningful money. There's more people in Tucson. The JCC is a much larger venue than here. I mean, if I can't get it done there, I would try to get it done there at the temple, but it's very small. It's very, very small, and I want to raise
I
meaningful
will
money.
talk to Abby this week and I'll make sure that I mention it.
I appreciate that. Thank you so much from the bottom of my heart.
Shabbat shalom.
Shalom,
Shabbat
Shabbat.
shalom.
Oh, well, that time was good.
Thank you, everyone.